Welcome back to the laws. I am the Mistress Nomad. Why to believe that the is all slide, imitable thing. We trust that when we place a cup on a table, the table will be there to catch it. We trust that when we look away from a building, it continues to exist in the exact same state as when we last saw it. We trust the physics of our world because we have no choice. But what happens when the trust is broken? What happens when the seamless fabric of our existence catches a snag and for a split second, you see the jurors turning behind the curtain? Simulation theory sast etter solves the more. Henifers might be naiven smorthed chimelsi den thing at den ori choose efreshers to find a tall sested. Usually the system works perfectly. But sometimes under high stress are in remote sectors where the processor power is low, the system glitches. And if you are the one to witness it, you never truly come back. If you want to keep these locks open, leave a like and subscribe to Grimmer Locks. Let me know in the comments which story kept you uptight. Stay safe. Now, let us open the file on Elias and the free glitches that unraveled his mind. I took the job at the file count tower because I wanted to disappear for a while. I was tired of the noise of the city, the constant pinging of notifications, and the relentless pace of modern life. I wanted silence. I wanted a kind of isolation that forced you to comfort your own tales because there is nothing else to do. I was assigned to Telfor, a structure perched on a granite pit in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. It was late October. The tourist season was long and the rains were beckoning to eat her. The dry luck to the trail it took 3 hours on a gravel rate due they tain at a more powerful tennis ball. From there, it was if for my hike up a switchback trail with a 40-pound fag strapped to my back. By the time I reached the tower, my legs were burning and my lungs were screaming for oxygen, but the view was worth it. Or at least. I thought it was its time. The tower was a 4 by 4 cabin weapon windows sitting out a 40-foot wooden trestle. It offered a 360-degree view of the wilderness. Miles of dark green hemlock and fir trees stretched out in every direction, disappearing into a quaint night. For the first 20 days, everything was perfect. It was quiet. The only sounds were the wind whistling through the metal crate of the catwalk and the occasional creak of the timber settling in the cold. I spent my time reading, drinking black coffee, and scanning the horizon with my binoculars, looking for the telltale wisps of smokes that bit too wide and wide, like beat away eyes and wide far. It was peaceful. But on the morning of the third day, the feeling of peace began to curling up something abyss. It started with a headache. A low throbbing pressure right behind my ears that felt less like a biological pain and more like the hum of high voltage. I was sitting in the high chair, looking out towards the North Ridge, about 5 miles away. The light was flat and gray, casting no shadows. I remember storing at the ridge line, chasing the checksum, edge of the rock ends the sky. Pat was wine and noticed it. The ridge looks so not out of focus exactly. My vision was 2020. It was more like the detail wasn't fully there. You know when you are playing an old video game and the mountains in the distance are just low quality shapes until you encounter? That is what the North Ridge looked like. Which, means geometric, lacking the childlike rawness of real nature. I rubbed my eyes assuming it was fading. I blinked hard and looked spade. It looked the same. A simplified version of mountain range. I stood up and walked into the window, leaning my forehead against the cold glass. I focused my attention on a specific landmark to ground myself. About 200 yards from the base of my tower, on a rocky outcrop, there was a dead cribspine tree. It was distinct because it had been struck by lightning years ago and split down the middle, forming a perfect V shape. He had looked at it 80,000 times since I arrived. I found the outcrop. I looked for the tree. It was gone. Here was bare gray rock. My stomach dropped. I felt a sudden flush of adrenaline. Teeth prickly hit the sprinkly hit spreadsheets your mech when you realize something is wrong. I knew that she was there. I had written about it in my Lubes book yesterday, liking how creepy it looked in the twilight. I pulled away from the window, grabbing my binoculars from the table, and brought them to my ears. I scanned the outcrop again. Nothing. Just rock. I lowered the binoculars, my heart hammering against my rasp. West, I losing my mind. Could I imagine the tree? I teed from the window to grab my water bottle, trying to steady my shaking. I took a long drink, counting to 10 in my head. One, two, three. I told myself I was dusty hydrated. The altitude was messing with me. 4, 5. I turned back to the window, and there it was. The court fine tree, the V shape. It was standing right there on the outcrop, as if it had never left. I gasped, actually stumbling back a step. But it wasn't just that the tree had returned. It was how it had returned it. It didn't fade in. It didn't grow. It was tridently there. Instantaneously. 1 second, zero data. The next second and full data. I stared at it, too willing to blink. The bark looked hyper-realistic now, sharper than everything else in it. I stood there for a full hour, thus watching a dead tree, waiting for it to vanish again. It didn't move. But the feeling of the room had changed. The silence of the tower didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy. It felt like the silence of an empty room after Chuman turns off a TV. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a blind spot in my vision. Maybe the emblem of the light hid the tree against the gray rock. I spent the rest of the afternoon obsessively checking the tree. Every time I looked away, I felt a spike of panic that when I looked back, it would be gone. By sunset, I had convinced myself it was a trick of the light. I forced myself to eat dinner tonight till the tasted like metal paste and try to read. But I couldn't focus on the words. I kept glancing at the windows. The sun went down, plunging the forest in likeness. Here is no darkness like the darkness but the deep woods. It is a physical way. I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling. The wind had picked up, rattling the window panes in their frames. I drifted into each restless slip, dreaming of gypsy shapes in wireframe mountains. When I woke up the next morning, the headache was worse, and that walls when the second glitch started. This one wasn't something I could explain away letting or dehydration. This one broke the fundamental laws of cause and effect. The sky was a rose purple color, heavy with unfallen rain. I was making coffee on the small propane stove. The blue flame hissed steadily. I picked up the metal kettle to pour the water. My hand slipped. I watched the kettle fall. It tumbled through the air, spinning slowly. I flinched, waiting for the loud clang of metal hitting the wooden floorboards. The kettle hit with Thor. Silence. Absolute silence. It bounced back, spilled hot water across the wood, and settled on its side. I stood there, frozen, my brain trying to process the disconnect. I saw the impact. I saw the vibration. But there was no sound. Then, 3 seconds later, clangs, test. The sound erupted in the room, deafeningly loud, completely out of sync with action. It was like watching a movie where the audio track has slipped a few seconds behind the video. I backed away until my back hit the wall. I looked at the kettle on the floor. It was still. but the sound of it rolling was still playing in the air, echoing around me. Gossip. I clapped my hands to gibber. Nothing. Waited. One, eight, two, three. Clap. The sound quacked through the room, startling me even to I was the one who made it. I started to hyperventilate. The delay was terrifying. It made me feel nauseous like I was disconnected from my own body. I tried to speak. Hello. I whispered. My lips moved. I felt the vibration in my throat. But the room remained silent. I waited. Hello. My own voice whispered back to me from the empty air. 3 seconds too late. This is the end of part 1. The audio lagged in stop. For the next 6 hours, I leapt in a world where my actions and their consequences were different from one another. It is impossible to describe the psychological this takes on a person. We rely on instantaneous feedback to navigate the world. When you taught something, you feel it. When you drop something, you hear it. When that link is severed, you feel like a ghost hounding your own life. I sat on my butt, terrified to move. Every movement created a delay that my brain can process. I would shift my weight on the mattress, feel the springs compress, and then, seconds later, hear the creak, the metal. It made me feel dizzy, like I was constantly falling. I tried to stay perfectly still, but my breathing was loud and rapid. I wouldn't feel my chest bend and then hear the gasp of air filling the room after it had already started e-spooling. It was a suffocating echo chamber. Around noon, the storm finally broke. The purple sky ripped open and rain began to hammer against the glass walls of the lookout. Or rather, I saw the rain hitting the glass deck, heavy sheets of water smashed against the windows. The visual violence of the storm was intense. But inside the cabin, it was dead silent. I watched the waiter streak down the pans, watched the trees eyesight freshing in the wind, bending almost died. Then, the sound arrived. It hit me like physical blow. All rain, Celtic symphony of wine and rain that didn't match the rhythm of what I was seeing. The wine would gust visually, but the roar would stay steady. Then the trees would go still, and the shriek of the gun would tear through the cabin. It was disorienting, sickening. I covered my ears, but the delay meant I heard the storm for 3 seconds after my hands were pressed tight against my head. And then came the lightning. I was looking out the south window when the sky turned a blinding, electric white. A fork of lightning struck the rich last into my way. It was close. I should have heard the crack instantly. I braced myself. Silence. I counted. Only. 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing. The delay was getting longer. It wasn't just 3 seconds anymore. It was stretching. 10 seconds, pastons. I lowered my ends. Confused. Had the glitch stopped it? Had the sound simply failed to let? 10. The cabin shook. Boom. The thunder didn't just start, it felt like it originated from inside my skull. The windows rattled in their frames. But the delay. 10 seconds. That wasn't just a lag. That was processing error. I scrambled for my handle radio. I needed to call base. I needed to hear another human voice to see if this was happening everywhere or just up here. I fumbled with the Zol, turning it to the emergency channel. Base, this is Tower 4. To copy. I stared at the radio, waiting. My lips had moved. I had pushed the button. Quick. Body hadn't heard myself speak yet. I waited. 10 seconds. Base, this is Tower 4. You copy. My voice tiny and distant, finally emerging from the air map. I released the pigeon and waited for a response. Statics, just the hiss of why noise. But even the static single loop, a repeating pattern of hypophysis sounded less like random interference in my brackable lao, Pamela ignoring bin. I threw the radio onto the table. It hit silently. I turned my back on it, pacing the small room, my hands gripping my hair. Todd. The radio hit the table 10 seconds later. I screamed. Stop it. I waited. The room stayed silent. I waited longer. My scream never came. The audio hadn't just lagged. It had been deleted. The system had recased the error and simply wiped the file. I sank to the floor, curling irritable in the corner of the room, away from the window. I closed my eyes, trying to shout the delay world. If I didn't move, if I didn't make a sound, the glitch can hurt me. I lay there for hours as the storm raged silently outside, the sound crashing in ways that had no connection to reality. Eventually, a session took over. I paced out on the floor, the cold wood pressing against my cheek. When I woke up, the silence was real. The storm had passed. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting a weak winter light over the forest. I sat up slowly, testing the air, tapping my charcoal against the floorboards. Tap. Instant. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The sound of my eggshell was immediate. The audio desync was over. The physics of the world had recessed. I stood up, my legs stiff and aching. I followed a desperate native out of the tower. I needed to walk on actual ground, touch actual dirt. I needed to verify that the world outside this glitch wasn't real. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. I walked out onto the catwalk, the cold mountain air hitting my face. It felt real. It smelled like pine needles and wet earth. I descended the 4-foot wooden staircase, my boots thudding reassuringly against the steps. I reached the bottom and started walking down a trail, the spring where we got our well all weather. The forest was eerily quiet after the storm, dripping and still. Hat was when I saw him. A hiker. He was about 50 yards down the trail, coming up towards the tower. He was wearing a bright red rain jacket and a blue backpack. He was looking down at his boots as he walked. Relief flooded through me. A person. A real living human being. Hey. I sat, waving my arm. Hey. Up here. The hiker stopped. He looked up. He had a generic, pleasant face, clean shaven, sharp brown hair. He saw me, smiled, and raised his hand in a wave. Morning. He called out. I started to jog towards him. Man, am I glad to see you. You have no idea when he stopped. The hiker had taken 3 steps up the trail. Instantly, he was back at the spot where he had first stopped. He looked up. He smiled. He raised his hand. Morning. I froze. My blood ran cold. He took 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. Snape. He was back at the start. Hey, leaned up. He smiled. Same angle. Same timing. He raised his hand. Morning. I backed away, my breath catching in my throat. No, he whispered. No, no, no. I watched him. Step. 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 Reset. Look up. Smile. Wave. Morning. It wasn't a person. It was a loop. An NP stuck in a pacing error. I grabbed a rock from the ground and threw it. I don't know why. I just wanted to disrupt the pattern. The rock so throw with Aaron hit the hacker in the chest. It paced right through him. He didn't flinch. He didn't react. The rock didn't bounce of it just clipped through his texture and landed on the dirt by him. The hiker took 3 steps. Reset. Look up. Smile. Wave. Morning. I turned and ran. I scrambled back up the trail towards the tower, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm east my ribs. I didn't look back. I could still hear his voice behind me, fading in to the distance but never changing in volume or tone. Morning. 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 I reached the base of the tower and sprinted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I burst through the cave in and slammed the door, locking it. Asked if a lock could keep out a glitch in reality. I paced the room, hyperventilating. The tree, the audio, now the hicker. The wall wasn't just broken, it was dissolving. I grabbed my key. I had to leave. I had to get to my truck and drive until I hit a city, until I saw thousands of people, until I cast them out of this nightmare. I packed nothing. I just grabbed the keys and the radio. I was up to open the door when I looked out the west window towards the Trillin where the service ridden. I thought that was where my truck was parked. I stopped. My hand hovered over the door handle. I looked scissor. The service road was the Creeville turnaround was there. But my truck was gone. And beyond a turnaround where the road should have curved down the mountain towards the highway, there was nothing. I don't mean there was fog. I don't mean there was darkness. I mean there was nothing. The world simply ended. Part 3. The Blue Void. I didn't want to go out there. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to hide under the bed. But I knew the stowing in the tower was a death sentence. If the simulation was crashing and the tower would be down sooner or later, I forced myself to open the door. I walked down the stairs, moving slowly, terrified that the stairs might vanish under my feet. The forest was dead silent now. No wind, no birds, even the looping mooring. After the hiker had stopped, I walked past the spot where the hiker had been. He was gone. Delity. I walked to the service road, my boots crunching on the gravel. The sound was instinct. Thank God. He walked to the edge with the turnaround. I stood at the precipice of the world. The gravel road ended in a perfectly straight line, as if it had been cut with a razor blade. Beyond the line, there was a flat, fearless expanse of blue. It wasn't sky blue. It was the default, unshaded blue of a Commodore Proverb's void space. It stretched out infinitely in all directions of down, left, right. Here was no horizon, just blue. I looked down. The earth beneath the gravel was a thin shell, maybe 6 inches thick. Underneath it was touched a wireframe mesh, glowing faintly green. I fell to my knees, staring into the void. My truck wasn't gone. It had never existed. This place, this sector, it was all there was. Then the sky began to flicker. It wasn't a lightning flash. It was the texture of the clouds blinking and out of existence. 1 second, right overcast. The next second, the blue void turned back to gray. Bling, bling. The frequency was increasing. I looked back at the tower. It was flickering too. The wood was turning transparent, revealing the wireframe structure underneath. A sound started to build. Not a natural sound. A low, Digital hum, deep and vibrating, like a massive server room powering down. It grew louder, filling the air, vibrating in my teeth. I looked at my hands. They were flickering. I saw the skin of my fingers vanish, revealing bone. Tend upon vanished, revealing a green wireframe. Then my hand went back. Bling, bling. I was being dullet. I scrambled back from the edge of the void, crawling towards the center of the rimming round. No! I screamed. And so, Imreal, the hand became a deafening roar. The sky turned blue and stayed blue. The cheese around me simply popped out of existence. Pop, pop, pop. One by one, the ashes were being removed. I closed my eyes. I called Didio Ado a bone. I tried to remember something real. Mice face. The smell of coffee. The feeling of grass. Pop. The ground beneath me vanished. I didn't fall. Gravity had been disabled. I floated in the blue void. I opened my eyes. There was nothing left. No mountain. No tower. No forest. Just me, floating in infinite sea of flat blue. And then a text box appeared in front of my face. It was simple, white rectangle with latex. Cholera, new font. It read our sector, poor corruption critical. Parch complete. Reinitializing ASET alias subjectsum. I stirred in the works. I said, a wasted user. I wasn't the player. I was the code. No, I whispered. The text box channed. Loading. I felt my memories beginning to fade. The fear straining away, replaced by a cold, static numbness. I forgot why I was screaming. Loading? Tarmidi's RT. I forgot the hiker. Loading. I forgot my name. Loading. Ralpharm 2 Apple. 2 Sector 4. Fire Lookout Simulation. Day 1. I blinked. I was sitting in the high chair of the fire counter power. The sun was shining. The sky was a perfect, crisp blue. I held a cup of hot coffee in my hand. It smelled rich and dark. I looked out at the horizon. Miles of green hemlock and fir trees stretched out in every direction. It was beautiful. I took a sip of coffee. I felt peaceful. I was here to escape the noise of the city. I was here for the silence. I picked up my binoculars and scanned the north ridge. It looked sharp and majestic. I lowered the glass and looked at the rocky outcrop near the base of the tower. Here stood a crooked pine tree, split down the middle in a perfect V-shape. I smiled. It was going to be a good week. But, just for a microsecond. The coffee cup in my hand flickered, and I felt a phantom headache, a ghost of a memory, probing right by my